There is not going to be a single way in which people respond to the memorial. I think what I wanted to do was to be very clear about the absence that was suffered that day and its persistence. The time does not erase and heal all wounds, but changes how we feel about them. This is the site of a wound. If this is a scar that we don't hide, but it's not a scar that we flaunt and celebrate either. It's a scar that's just there. It's part of our day-to-day life. It will be part of our day-to-day life moving forward. But and it brings the loss of that day into every day, not in a way that incapacitates us, but in a way that we say this is part of who we are and how we move forward. I actually started to think about a memorial a few months after the attack, and I had this very inexplicable vision, this idea in my head of the surface of the river torn open, and these two square holes forming in the surface of the river and water spilling into these voids. And it really didn't make any sense to me. I mean, water doesn't behave that way. But I was very intrigued by this idea, and I spent a few months exploring this, sketching it, building models, and eventually I built a small fountain that captured the sense of the surface of the water torn open by these two voids and water spilling into these square voids. And these voids never filling up, always remaining empty, despite the passage of time, despite the water flowing into it. And I built this little model, and I photographed it on the roof of my apartment building with the skyline of the city and the absence of the towers in the skyline being reflected in these two voids in the surface of the river. And a year later, there was a competition for the design of the master plan, and I wanted to know if that idea could be investigated further, changed in some ways by bringing it here to the site, instead of being on the river where you could never go, being right here where the towers once stood. And so out of that came this idea of these two square voids, which are where the towers once stood. And when you walk around these voids and encounter the names of the dead, you're doing that within the tower footprints. And you're seeing the scale of the towers which were once there, and you're seeing the multitude of names which surround each void, the close to 1,500 names around each pool. And I think that's a moment, a very sad but powerful comprehension of standing there and understanding in a small way, because I don't think a complete understanding can be had, but understanding in a small way the toll of what happened that day. Places like Union Square and Washington Square, these public spaces are places that knit us together as a society. They are not just places that bring us physically together in one space, they bring us together emotionally, they connect us to one another. And they played such an important role in helping us heal after 9/11 and helping us come to an understanding of that day. I want people to be able to have a moment of quiet contemplation, of thoughtful interaction, to let that inner dialogue take place, that conversation that we might have with ourselves that we often postpone or don't have because we're busy, because we're running on to the next thing. And at a place like this, I think you can set aside the day-to-day life. You can forget the city for a moment and all of its noises and sights, and focus on the names which are in front of you, and focus on your relationship to the history of that day and to the present and what you might do about it.